A translator malfunction led to a smile, and then a kiss that shocked them both. The glitch. Marcus Chen stood in the embassy's preparation room checking his neural translator for the 5th time in as many minutes. The small device nestled behind his ear hummed softly, its system syncing with the linguistic database he'd spent 3 months updating. This was it, his first assignment as lead translator for an interplanetary summit, and his hands wouldn't stop trembling. "You'll be fine," he muttered to himself, adjusting his collar in the mirror. "You've trained for this." The doors opened and the Etherian delegation entered the grand hall. Marcus's breath caught. He'd seen photographs, of course, studied cultural briefings and holographic recordings, but nothing prepared him for the reality of Sarah Nightbloom in person. She moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost like dancing, her silver-toned skin catching the light in ways that made her seem to shimmer. When her gaze found his across the room, he felt a jolt of recognition, as if something fundamental had just clicked into place. He approached, heart hammering, and opened his mouth to deliver the carefully rehearsed formal greeting. The translator hummed, processing his words. What came out, according to the shocked expression on Sarah's interpreter's face, was decidedly not the official welcome. "Your smile makes the stars jealous, and I am undone by the music of your presence," the translator announced in perfect Etherian. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. That wasn't what he'd said. That wasn't even close to what he'd said. He'd said, "On behalf of Earth, we welcome you to these proceedings." For a moment, silence hung in the air like a held breath. Sarah's entourage stiffened, their expressions unreadable. Marcus wanted the floor to open and swallow him whole. His career was over before it had truly begun. He'd be a footnote in diplomatic history, the translator who destroyed interplanetary relations with a single butchered greeting. Then Sarah laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle or a diplomatic titter. It was real laughter, bright and unrestrained, that transformed her whole face. The sound cascaded through the hall like bells, and Marcus found himself staring, mortification temporarily forgotten, in the face of such genuine joy. "Well," Sarah said in flawless English, her voice carrying notes that reminded him of wind chimes. "That is certainly more memorable than the usual welcomes I receive." Her eyes sparkled with amusement. "Though, I'm curious, was that your device speaking or your heart?" Marcus fumbled with his translator, face burning. The device, I swear. There's been a malfunction. I sincerely apologize." "Don't," Sarah interrupted gently, stepping closer. "In my experience, malfunctions often reveal truths that careful words conceal."
The unexpected kiss. The technical team swarmed around Marcus's translator, their instruments beeping and whirring as they tried to diagnose the problem. He sat in a side chamber, acutely aware of Sarah standing near the window, her advisors having stepped out to give them privacy, or perhaps to discuss the diplomatic incident he'd just created. "I really am sorry," Marcus said again, running his hand through his dark hair. "I've never had equipment fail like that before. The greeting was supposed to be standard, formal, appropriate." "Boring?" Sarah offered, turning from the window with a slight smile. "Well, yes, but appropriately boring." He gestured helplessly. "Instead, I basically told you that you're cosmically attractive, which, while not technically untrue, is absolutely not something a professional translator should—" He caught himself, realizing what he just admitted. "I mean, objectively speaking, your people are known for their aesthetic." "Marcus." She said his name softly, and he stopped talking, looking up at her. "Breathe." He did, drawing in a shaky breath. When had she gotten so close? He could see the faint patterns in her skin now, like frost on glass, intricate and beautiful. "In my culture," Sarah said, her voice taking on a thoughtful quality, "we value authenticity above protocol. Your malfunction was more honest than 100 perfect greetings. She paused, something shifting in her expression. You've been looking at me all evening like I'm a puzzle you're trying to solve. I look at everyone like that, he admitted. It's the linguist in me. I'm always trying to read the communication beneath the words, body language, micro-expressions, the rhythm of breathing that indicates emotion. And what do you read in me? The question hung between them, intimate despite the formal setting. Marcus swallowed hard. Curiosity? Intelligence? A weariness with the performance you have to maintain? He held her gaze. And maybe, just maybe, the same pull I'm feeling. Sarah's expression softened into something he couldn't quite name. You humans, she said, have a custom I've observed. When something brings you joy, you sometimes express it physically. A touch, an embrace. Yes, Marcus confirmed, pulse quickening. My people have something similar. When we share genuine laughter with someone, it creates a bond. We acknowledge it this way. Before Marcus could process her meaning, Sarah closed the distance between them and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle, but deliberate. Warm despite the coolness of her skin. It lasted only seconds, but Marcus felt the world reorganize itself around that point of contact. When she pulled back, they were both slightly breathless. That, Sarah whispered, was not a malfunction. Marcus's mind raced, 1,000 protocols and regulations flooding his thoughts, but all of them seemed distant and unimportant compared to the way Sarah was looking at him, hopeful and vulnerable and real. No, he agreed quietly, his hand finding hers. That was something else entirely.
Navigating new territory. The summit had devolved into a blur of meetings, negotiations, and formal dinners, but Marcus found his attention increasingly divided. Every session where he served as translator became an exercise in professionalism, while hyper-aware of Sarah's presence across the room. Their eyes would meet during tedious procedural discussions, and he'd see the hint of a smile that no one else seemed to notice. On the third day, she requested his assistance reviewing linguistic nuances in a trade agreement. Her advisors raised eyebrows but didn't object. It was, after all, a reasonable request. They met in a quiet library filled with texts from a dozen worlds. I think this clause may be misinterpreted, Saruma said, pointing to a section of the document. But when Marcus leaned in to look, she added softly, or perhaps I just wanted an excuse to see you away from all the watching eyes. Is it working? Marcus asked, equally quiet. The excuse, I mean? Look at the document, Dr. Chen, and tell me if my concern is valid. Her voice carried the formal tone of a diplomat, but her hand had somehow found its way to rest near his on the table, their fingers almost touching. Marcus tried to focus on the words before him, but he was intensely aware of her nearness, the subtle scent she carried that reminded him of rain and something floral he couldn't identify. The translation is technically accurate, but yes, the connotation could be problematic. In Etherian, this phrase implies temporary arrangement, but in English, it suggests permanence. Like some things that begin as accidents, but become something we want to last. His breath hitched. We should probably talk about what happened. We probably should, she agreed. But instead of talking, she told him about Atheros, the cities built into living crystal formations, the way her people sang to encourage the growth of their homes, the gardens that glowed with bioluminescence at night. Her voice painted pictures, and Marcus found himself falling into the rhythm of her words, the poetry inherent in how she saw the world. In return, he told her about growing up between cultures, the child of immigrants who spoke 3 languages at home, how he'd always been fascinated by the spaces between words where true meaning lived. Communication isn't just about vocabulary, he explained. It's about understanding the heart behind the language. And what does your heart say? Sroom asked, turning to face him fully. Marcus reached across the small distance and took her hand properly this time, feeling the coolness of her skin, the slight difference in the way her fingers curved against his.
Cultural complications. The news traveled faster than Marcus had anticipated. By the morning of the 5th day, he found himself summoned to Ambassador Richardson's office, where he stood before the stern-faced woman who oversaw all Earth's extraterrestrial diplomatic relations. Dr. Chen, I've received reports about your conduct during the summit. She steepled her fingers, her expression unreadable. Multiple sources have observed what appears to be a personal relationship developing between you and dignitary Nightbloom. Marcus kept his expression neutral, though his heart raced. With respect, Ambassador, I've maintained all professional standards in my translations and duties. I'm not questioning your linguistic work, Richardson said. I'm questioning your judgment. You're aware, I assume, of the delicate nature of these negotiations, the years of careful diplomacy that brought us to this point? I am. Then you understand how any perceived impropriety could jeopardize everything. Earth's relationship with Aetheros is in its infancy. We cannot afford complications. Human connections are not complications. They're the foundation of real understanding between cultures. Richardson's expression softened slightly. An idealistic view, but we live in a world of political realities. I'm not forbidding you from anything. I can't control your personal life. But I am reminding you that your position here is predicated on maintaining neutral, professional relationships with all parties. Consider carefully what you're risking. The formal dinner that night was an exercise in torture. Protocol demanded specific seating arrangements, and Marcus found himself placed far from Sarah, surrounded by delegates who wanted to discuss technical translation questions, while his attention kept drifting to where she sat, equally trapped in conversation with Earth's Secretary of State. Across the length of the ornate table, through the forest of crystal glasses and elaborate centerpieces, their eyes met. Sarah's expression was composed, perfectly diplomatic, but he saw the tension in the set of her shoulders, the way her fingers traced the stem of her glass absently. An Aetherian official to her left spoke, and she turned to respond, the moment broken. Marcus forced himself to focus on the discussion around him, answering questions about linguistic preservation and cultural exchange programs, but part of his mind remained on her. The dinner stretched endlessly. Courses came and went. Speeches were made, toasts offered to friendship between worlds. Through it all, Marcus felt the weight of unspoken words, of touches not shared, of a connection forced into silence by the machinery of diplomacy. When the meal finally ended, guests began to drift toward the reception hall. Marcus watched Sarah be swept up by her delegation, surrounded by advisors and officials, and felt the distance between them like a physical thing. He stepped out onto a balcony, needing air, needing space from the suffocating formality. The night was clear, stars visible despite the city lights, and he found himself wondering which one was hers, which distant point of light she called home. The third star in Cassiopeia. That's where Aetheros orbits. Marcus turned to find Sarah standing in the doorway, having somehow escaped her handlers. Without a word, she crossed to him and took his hand, both of them knowing they were probably being watched, but choosing not to care.
A language of their own. The summit's final night arrived with bittersweet weight. In 12 hours, the Aetherian delegation would depart, and Marcus tried not to think about what that meant. He'd spent the day in translation duties, professional and distant, while his chest felt hollow. After the closing ceremony, he found himself drawn to the observation deck, a glass-enclosed space at the top of the embassy building. The city stretched below, glittering with life, but his eyes went to the stars above. "I hoped I'd find you here," Sarah's voice came from behind him. He turned, drinking in the sight of her. She'd changed from her formal attire into something simpler, her silver skin seeming to glow faintly in the dim light. "Shouldn't you be at the farewell reception?" "Shouldn't you?" she countered, moving to stand beside him. I told my advisors I needed a moment of quiet reflection. They're very understanding when I phrase things formally. Despite everything, Marcus smiled. You're learning to speak like a diplomat. I've always known how. The question is when to use that language and when to speak from the heart. She turned to face him fully. We've been dancing around the obvious, Marcus. Tomorrow I leave. This is where we're supposed to acknowledge that it was lovely while it lasted and return to our separate worlds. Is that what you want? His voice came out rough. No. The single word held conviction. I want to find a way to make this work, however impossible that seems. I want to learn all the things about you we haven't had time for. I want to discover if what we found in 6 days can survive distance and time and political complications. Marcus reached for her, his hands finding her waist. My assignment here ends in 3 months. After that, I could request a posting to the Etherean embassy. I could advocate for a cultural exchange program, extended visits, linguistic collaboration. We're good at finding official reasons to see each other. We are, he agreed. Though I should probably warn you, I'm terrible at long-distance communication. I overanalyze messages, worry about word choice, never know what to share and what to say for when we're together. And I, Sarah said, tend to avoid difficult conversations when I'm uncertain. I retreat into formality as a defense mechanism. So we're both disasters at this? Absolutely hopeless, she confirmed. And then she was kissing him again, more deeply this time, with no malfunction or cultural excuse to hide behind. Just the choice to be close, to claim this moment against all the practical reasons they shouldn't. When they finally broke apart, breathless and smiling, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. I don't know how we make this work, he admitted. The logistics alone are impossible. Different planets, different responsibilities, all the eyes watching us. Then we'll figure it out one impossible step at a time, Sarah interrupted gently. Languages are learned word by word. Relationships are built moment by moment. We have time. Do we? We're creating our own language here, she said, where a glitch becomes a beginning, where a kiss speaks louder than any treaty, where two people from different worlds choose to find a way forward together. That's not something that ends just because a summit does. Marcus pulled her close, holding her against him as the stars wheeled overhead. Below them, the city hummed with life. Above them, somewhere in that vast darkness, hung the world she called home. And between them, in the space of held breath and racing hearts, a new understanding formed, one that needed no translator, no formal protocols, no carefully chosen diplomatic words. Just the simple truth that some connections transcend language, distance, and even the space between stars. I'll see you again, Marcus promised. You will, Sarah agreed, her smile radiant. We're fluent in each other now. That's not a language either of us will ever forget. And as they stood together in the observation deck, creating a vocabulary of touches and whispered promises, the malfunction that had started everything seemed less like an accident and more like fate finding its own imperfect way to speak.